The Trayvon Martin case was one of the most controversial and polarizing in recent memory. Joel Gilbert has made a remarkable film called The Trayvon Hoax that reveals facts and details that were certainly unknown to me and I think most people prior to the film. Larry Klayman now represents Mr. Zimmerman in what is to be an historic case. Gentlemen, welcome back to the program. How are you both today?
Good, Jason. Thank you for having us.
Great to be back. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys are really breaking ground on this. And, you know, it was, I remember when it happened, I was pretty fooled by the whole thing because all the noise, the smoke and fire and craziness on TV, if you're watching from the periphery, you're left with the impression that the social engineers behind the whole operation want you to have. And I've become newly interested after seeing Joel's film, The Trayvon Hoax. He's done incredible work in uncovering evidence that was unknown previously. And it seems to me that social engineering has played a major role in convincing people of certain things. What kind of background can you give us about this?
Well, let me say up front, we'll talk about the lawsuit, obviously, because it's Joel's newly discovered evidence which gives rise to this lawsuit in large part, notwithstanding the defamation of the Martin family attorney, Benjamin Crump, who wrote a book about whites committing genocide against colored people and then featured George Zimmerman as the culprit, one of them. But let Joel go with what he uncovered, and then we'll factor it into the lawsuit that we filed just the other day, which is really taken off like mad. I mean, it's all over the world because it is a very important case, and it has the potential of changing the nature of things in this country and around the world, where people are scapegoated, where they're victimized by a corrupt legal system and by those who will participate in that corrupt legal system and, in fact, further it. And, of course, the complaint can be found at Larry Klayman. People know how to spell my name, KLAYMAN.com. It speaks for itself. But I want Joel to explain how he uncovered this evidence, and it is completely compelling. It's backed up. He did a tremendous job as a researcher, an investigative reporter, and as a writer and film producer.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's both a book and a film, of course, companion. #1 on Amazon right now, and you can start by looking at the TrayvonHoax.com and see the trailer, live stream the movie, or buy the book or DVD over on Amazon. And it's been a really incredible investigative journey for myself. My head is still spinning, even though I worked on it. It's still unbelievable what I discovered, and incredible, both because of the malfeasance of the media, of the justice system, and how this was the turning point. This was ground zero for the crashing of race relations in the country. Black Lives Matter was started because of this, led directly to the Ferguson effect, where, of course, Martin family attorney Ben Crump ran up there with Al Sharpton to represent the family of Michael Brown with the hands up, don't shoot narrative before they burned down the place. And I think this film, by showing what really happened, where this all started, I think it has a chance to turn the tide on this false racial narrative that has been propagated by the media for 6 or 7 years, that America is suddenly a racist white country. I'm from Tennessee. I grew up in East Tennessee in the 80s. And black and white kids, we were all together. There was no question about race or color or skin tone. It was just the content of your character. And the media decided, because of this case, with the politicians backing it, that all of a sudden America became racist. And this is kind of where it all started. And I can tell you that no one has suffered more from this than the black youth of America. And I get emails. My best and most emails are from African-American teenagers. One young lady wrote me and said, I have a black son, and I was afraid for him growing up in America, and now I realize we got played, and thank you so much. I'm not afraid anymore. So this is the race-fueled narrative, fear-fueled narrative that the media put out there, and we've been seeing the Democrat candidates trying to manipulate black voters with this false narrative even today. But as far as the case itself, the film takes you through my investigation from the very beginning. I get into the cell phone records of Trayvon Martin, the public record documents from the state of Florida, and I read his 3,000 text messages and looked at all the 3,000 photos, 1,500 contacts, hundreds of emails. Got to know Trayvon the last 8 months of his life, and I found out he wasn't a thug, but he wasn't a rocket scientist either that the media made him out to be. And I saw a very troubled young teen that his life kind of went into a spiral downward in the last 3 months of his life, which is very detailed in the film. And I also discovered, of course, that this girlfriend named Diamond that he was texting back and forth with was not the girl that showed up in court, Rachel Gentile, who claimed that she was Diamond and provided the prosecutors with kind of a made-to-order storyline to get Zimmerman arrested in the first place. So I can walk you through the chronology if you want, or if you have some questions, or I can jump right into it if you like.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing film that people really need to see, because what you present is just so evidence-based, so factual. It's, as Larry said, it's essentially irrefutable. I believe this is what you would call prima facie evidence, right, Larry? I mean...
That's right, Jason. You've become a lawyer yourself. You're better than most lawyers. You understand what's going on. And Joel really nailed it. It's airtight. And the complaint, of course, took the evidence that he uncovered, and we're using it. And we brought cases for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, defamation. There are other causes of action that perhaps may be added to the complaint. So this is very important, what he found. And we hope that we can bring about justice, not just for George Zimmerman, but everyone is George Zimmerman in a way. Yesterday it was George Zimmerman. And in fact, it continues today because he's been destroyed. He has severe PTSD. People have shot at him, tried to kill him.
Wow.
He can't find employment. Oh. And he's been destroyed. But
lost his marriage, didn't
today,
he, Larry?
Yeah, and today it's Zimmerman. Tomorrow it could be you. And the irony here, and I'll turn it back to Joel, is that the same kind of injustice in the legal system is the same injustice that African Americans know really, really well about, how the system works. And that's why, after this lawsuit was filed, as I'll talk about more later, I got a lot of threatening messages and belligerent, off-color remarks. And it came primarily from people on the left who were white. It was about 95%. Very few African Americans, went after me for filing this case.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I was very interested to see, once the publicity for the lawsuit jumped up in the last 48 hours, we actually got responses from the Martin family, from Benjamin Crump. Then now even they've got Sabrina Fulton and her brother commenting. And all the comments, they're not addressing the substance of this issue that Rachel Gentile was a fake witness and a fraud and an imposter. They're just dismissing the film as, Crump, quote unquote, asinine. So that tells you the whole story right there. Yeah, and they're just dismissing it as ridiculous. It's asinine. I guess if there was something wrong with the substance, they would right away say that no, Diamond Eugene. I'd like to hear Sabrina let us know if she ever met Diamond Eugene, because Diamond Eugene sure was tweeting about meeting with knowing Sabrina Fulton, and she's proven to have known about the witness switch and did not come forward. She's the candidate for 2020 for Miami-Dade commissioner. And she was just endorsed by Elizabeth Warren, of all people, in addition to Hillary Clinton. So I think there's in a Democrat Party, I think they're going to try to bring her back to the 2020 convention like they did in 2016 to help repeat this false narrative to the black community that there's, armed white men in the streets or police officers that might shoot you because of your skin color. That's the Trayvon hoax. The Trayvon hoax is two things. It's the substitution of a legitimate phone witness who was on the phone with Trayvon Martin in the days and minutes up to when he was in this altercation, Diamond Eugene, with Rachel Gentile, an imposter. And the Trayvon hoax is also the name I give to the hoax that the media plays on black Americans every day by running it with and repeating any ridiculous racial story, like Jussie Smollett attacked at 2 a.m. by Trump supporters in sub-zero Chicago,
right,
who gave him a bleach bath, in addition to saying it's MAGA country. God, no, they run with this like it's true without asking any questions. I remember when I released the film at the National Press Club 2 months ago, media was reporting on a black girl in Virginia who claimed that 3 white kids cut off her dreadlocks. The next day, they reported that Mike Pence's wife works at this school. They were so excited to have another addition to the story. 3 days later, the mother says, hoax, my daughter lied, it was a hoax.
Wow.
And the media just run with this stuff. So, that's the Trayvon hoax in 2 levels. And I think it's very important to bring the country back together. I want people to understand that all this racial division that started 6, 7 years ago was pushed out by the media and politicians, including the Obama administration. I talk about how they actually sent the DOJ down to Sanford, Florida. Once the Sanford police had exonerated Zimmerman, they looked at all the evidence, 911 calls, eyewitnesses, physical evidence. They said, this is over. See you later. It's not stand your ground. It's pure self-defense. Justice Department sends down agents to organize protests. It's illegal against someone with no probable cause. And that's when Benjamin Crump, after pressuring Diamond Eugene for 3 weeks, people in their circle were pressuring her. She would not come forward under duress. We can tell from her tweets, she only agreed to do this recorded phone call with Ben Crump, where she just agreed with everything Crump said. He had this press conference and said, we got all the evidence now. Next day, Barack Obama came on board. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Next day it was LeBron James. NBA and the state of Florida was pressured into appointing a special prosecutor. 2 weeks later, they come down to Miami to interview 16-year-old Diamond Eugene. They go to her house, got the address on the unredacted documents, and they're sent away to a home where a worker for Trayvon's mother, Sabrina Fulton, lives. Rachel Gentel shows up, 18 years old. She said, hi, my nickname is Diamond Eugene. And they go ahead and interview her anyway. And you can even see in the trailer where at the end of the interview, she confesses and says, I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. So it's a tremendous prosecutorial malfeasance. It's a story that changed the country for the negative. And I'm hoping when people see it, and I know that when people see it, they're pretty much hopping mad that this could have happened, not only to Zimmerman, but to the country.
Well, and you got a headline up there from NPR, which didn't write exactly a neutral article, but it was better than what they usually write.
Well, I want to address that, Larry.
There's been massive press on this, Jason, but I might point out the $100 million isn't just with regard to damages by the Martin family, by people in the Martin family that participated in this witness fraud. It's against the state of Florida, the prosecutors. I love the state of Florida. That's my home state, but I'm appalled at what went on here with the prosecution, and they're going to have to pay up. And it's also against Benjamin Crump, who wrote this defamatory book, open season,
legalized genocide of colored people.
Now, why would you use the word? Yeah, if you're black, why would you use the word colored people? You're trying to whip up racial division and hatred, and so it's for defamation. And guess who published this book? HarperCollins. Guess who owns HarperCollins? Rupert Murdoch and his sons. Guess who owns Fox News? Rupert Murdoch and his sons. And you've heard me rail about Fox News on your show and on my radio show and elsewhere. This is a two-faced, frankly, amoral family that plays both sides of the street for profit. And that's why Fox is now moving left. That's why they've got this lunatic Judge Napolitano on there and Chris Wallace trashing Trump. At the same time, they have Hannity and others running interference for Trump at the same time. Yeah. So, they're going to have to pay up too. And this is just an estimate, the $100 million. I was asked, and you can see this, on the YouTube channel of Freedom Watch. Yeah. This is a private case, but I put it up on Freedom Watch's YouTube so people could see it because it's educational. I was asked, why $100 million? And I said, well, number one, it's an estimate. The jury's going to have to come up with the actual amount. But then the person asked me from NBC, don't you think that's a lot? And I said, I don't think it's enough because we're going to be asking for punitive damages. And the purpose here is to prevent this from ever happening again to other people. Let's break through this race war. Let's have black, white, Christian, Jew, others live together, as brothers, as we are. It's not to create racial division, it's to eliminate it. And unless you stand up to it, and Zimmerman is brave enough to do it, and I'm brave enough to do it, and I might add, Joel uncovered this. I didn't ask him to do it. He uncovered this, and when he did, I felt duty-bound when George Zimmerman asked me to represent him to take this case at great risk because, there are people out there that want to destroy us for doing this.
Let me point out something else to you guys. The reason why I brought up that NPR article. As I said, I've been, I was totally unaware of social engineering before I started Crowdsource the Truth, but it's become a fascination because it's very dangerous. NPR publishes this thing that says that George Zimmerman sues Trayvon Martin's family for more than $100 million. That is a subtle way of them trying to make people who read it think that George Zimmerman is victimizing Trayvon Martin's family. It seems like the suit is really more focused on the lawyer who was the driving force behind this, but he's not mentioned in the headline at all. I would also point out that this Stay Woke shirt that Trayvon Martin's mother is wearing is using the Run DMC logo, something that's going to be immediately recognizable, certainly to anybody my age. I was a big fan of Run DMC. I used to break dance with black guys, white guys. As Joel said, it wasn't a racial thing, but I do believe that this is designed to identify in the minds of people who are familiar with and fans of Run DMC. So all the headlines I've seen have focused very much on this being a lawsuit against the Martin family and not focusing nearly as much on Benjamin Crump, the really questionable lawyer.
It's not against the entire family, but there were people that participated in this witness fraud. And I've been asked that question too. And I say, look, bearing false witness is one of the top 10 commandments of Christians and Jews. Mm-hmm. And you can't turn the other cheek just because somebody's a minority. I wouldn't expect it for majority, is that we all should be held accountable when something like this occurs. And these are not good people that they would do something like that, because George Zimmerman risked life imprisonment if he had been convicted. And if he had been charged with first-degree murder instead of second-degree murder, he could have gotten the electric chair in Florida.
Right.
So this is a serious matter. And to say, okay, I'm above the law because I'm a minority, stay woke, no, we're all accountable. It doesn't matter what race, color, creed, or religion you are, is that you have to bear responsibility for your actions.
I would like to say also in the film and even the book, I actually visit the Antioch Christian Baptist Church where Trayvon went to church with his mother. And I comment in the film about how many people in this saga and this drama were heavily involved in Christianity. Trayvon's mother, by all knowledge, was a righteous Christian woman. She liked to say, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord." Reverend Sharpton came down and helped to incite against Zimmerman. There were so many people, even Rachel Gentile. If you look at her Facebook page, it's just full of proverbs and quotes from Christianity. Even Diamond Eugene, the real girlfriend, she quotes God all the time. So I asked the question, exactly where does God come in with all these people? If you want to convict somebody, shouldn't your religion mitigate your actions to do the right thing?
Yeah, I might add, it doesn't have anything to do with Christianity. It has something to do with people misusing Christianity for their purpose, as people misuse Judaism for their purpose and people misuse Islam for their purpose. You can't hide behind a false veneer of being religious when you're violating one of the top 10 commandments.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not bear false witness, among other violations of the 10 commandments.
But this is exactly what social engineering is all about. Basically preying on people's emotions, convincing them, someone who is a devout Christian is going to identify with someone who is invoking the name of Christ and, basically pretending to be a religious person in order to gain somebody else's trust. It's pretty despicable, but I see it happening all the time. Now, let me ask you about this Diamond Eugene. Diamond is a nickname. Is Eugene her real last name, or is the whole name made up?
Well, if you remember from the film, Diamond was her legal middle name. Her full legal name is actually Brittany Diamond Eugene, and she was the 16-year-old girlfriend that Ben Crump spoke to and said she was 16, told Matt Lauer that. She's the voice on the phone.
Right.
With Crump. And in the film, you'll see that I do not only voice comparisons, but forensic handwriting analysis with a handwriting expert who focused on there's a very important document in the case, is a letter that's signed by Diamond Eugene. It's signed Diamond Eugene. And people remember the biggest moment from the court case was when Rachel Gentile took the stand and Zimmerman's defense attorney, Don West, said, "Did you sign that letter?" She said, "Yes." What name did you use? She said, Diamond Eugene. He said, why? She said, that's my nickname. He said, can you read the letter out loud? She said, I can't read. People remember that. And it was just a ridiculous idea to put in this imposter witness. But because so many people went along with it, and I think it should be closely looked at by the state of Florida, that the fact that why did the prosecution, I point this out in the book in a little more depth than the film, is that the prosecution based the arrest affidavit for Zimmerman on Rachel Gentel's statements, even though they knew that they contradicted the eyewitnesses. They also, by the way, used as part of the affidavit for arrest Sabrina Fulton's quote that the voice on the phone on the 911 tapes yelling for help, she said, was her son. They ignored the fact that an eyewitness, Jonathan Good, came out of his house and he told the police that the guy on the bottom was getting beat up was yelling for help. They discounted that Tracy Martin, Trayvon's father, told the police the day after when he listened to the 911 calls that it was not his son, and that Zimmerman also told the police he was screaming for help. So you throw out those three eyewitnesses and keep the girl on the phone that her description didn't match. You know, they were told, Crump said it's 16-year-old Diamond Eugene and 18-year-old Rachel Gentel shows up. So I have all those excerpts from the actual police interviews are in there, as well as the handwriting analysis. And it's actually quite entertaining as well. And it's even got some humor despite the seriousness of it. I go to Miami and I go to Little Haiti and try to find the background of this girl. They're all kind of Haitian Americans. And I go up to Tallahassee where I do find Diamond Eugene. She's in the movie. She was actually studying criminal justice, of all things, you know, the irony, at Florida State University. So it's an incredible adventure of kind of discovery, almost like how did this possibly happen? And then the implications are just incredible.
Yeah, it's an absolutely excellent film, and you did a tremendous job with it, Joel. I apologize for forgetting that detail. I saw it when it first came out. It's worth watching again, and if anyone hasn't yet seen the film, they should go to the TrayvonHoax.com. We're looking at the trailer right now. It really is a powerful journey, and it takes you step by step through Joel's process, how he found these details, this information. I mean, this issue of self-defense is critically important because Florida is a state where you can legally carry a gun, and I think that people need to consider that if, as an individual, you're exercising your Second Amendment rights and carrying a gun for your protection, if an unknown person starts attacking you and you know you have a gun and the gun is exposed, it immediately becomes a life and death situation because I think you must presume that the attacker will likely steal the gun and try to shoot you. So, you know, this guy's getting beaten. He can't necessarily gauge the age of the attacker. You've got some unknown person who's taller than you and beating you up. I agree, it's a total case of self-defense.
Well, here's my theory. I mean, Joel has his. I've seen the film too. But Trayvon Martin, you know, was having difficulty with his girlfriend, Diamond Eugene. He was very upset that night, and he took it out on George Zimmerman. You know, he became a punching bag, and he almost killed him. And contrary to what is being put up on websites, even, you know, certain major media networks like ABC, which is just basically going off the rails, they're likely going to be sued for defamation against me, against Joel, against Zimmerman. I can almost guarantee it. But they'll put up a picture of Trayvon Martin when he was about 10 years old to create the impression that some poor defenseless little person was shot. Is that Trayvon Martin was much bigger than George Zimmerman and had him down on the ground and was ready essentially to kill him. And that's what resulted here. I mean, and Joel can talk about it in greater detail.
Yeah, let me point out that what's interesting is how the narrative of the family and the media turned to the stand your ground law, as if, you know, saying that, oh, the problem is the law, we got to change the law, stand your ground. He shot him because of this stand your ground law, and that's why he couldn't be arrested. That was never the opinion of the Sanford Police Department. They had announced it was simply self-defense. And even when the Martin family went to Congress and Sabrina Fulton was testifying, and she was saying horrific things, like she said, in our community, people are afraid to even go and buy candy. She was saying that she wants to change the laws. And Ted Cruz, the only person that stood up and said, I'm sorry, this had nothing to do with the stand your ground law. Zimmerman's defense never cited stand your ground. The police never said it was stand your ground. It was just pure self-defense, like in the Bible. From Zimmerman's point of view, he had he says in the film, he is in the film, by the way, he did not even testify in his own trial, so you get to hear step by step what he said happened from his point of view, and you can pretty much judge for yourself and hear his story. And then I combine that with the evidence that I came up with, and you can see what really happened. And when you see how badly the media distorted the truth, you just have to wonder, just about in every other case, what is really going on. Of course, even Eric Holder's, Obama's Justice Department, had to admit that the Ferguson story of that Michael Brown was shot while trying to surrender with his hands up, that whole thing was just a lie. But the media, the damage the media does by spreading these lies, these slogans. In the Zimmerman case, the slogan was Skittles and iced tea.
Right.
He was just walking around with candy for his brother. In the Ferguson, hands up, don't shoot. There's always a slogan that the media just eats up, and they don't care to look into.
Well,
the worst one recently,
people they're selling an idea, so they need a good marketing slogan. I mean, this is basically what it is.
It's the media's job. It's the media's job to ask some questions, no media ever asked Rachel Jeantel, if you were on the phone when your friend was followed, your boyfriend was followed around, screamed for help for 50 seconds, 14 times, and was shot in cold blood, why didn't you immediately call the police rather than not doing anything? They never bothered to ask her, if she really was on the phone with him. So the media malfeasance is a big problem in this country. Hopefully I've contributed a little bit to embarrass them into doing their job.
Let me also point something out, which is interesting, because in and around that period, I was doing some research on stand your ground law. Florida was being vilified for having codified that by statute. But the reality is that the overwhelming majority of states in this country, either by statute or under common law, judge-created law, have stand your ground principles in their law.
What is that,
and even
stand your ground, Larry? People might not know.
Well, what is it? If you have a reasonable expectation that someone's going to kill you, you can shoot first. Like Wyatt Earp. Watch the trailer.
I think you're not required to retreat and run away.
Right.
That you can stand.
Right, but George didn't do that. He didn't shoot first.
He was getting beaten up. He was on the ground.
But Florida took a beating too. Its legal system over that, and it is a legitimate principle in the law to stand your ground. So this was being used by anti-gun advocates and activists, with regard to the whole Second Amendment issue.
Right. Well, it seems like they always do that. They have some sort of issue that they want to push. In the case of Jussie Smollett, it seemed that it was Cory Booker's reparations for Black Americans, which, listen, certainly if you've got a politician running for president talking about giving your family between $5,000 and $25,000, that's a pretty appealing thing to a lot of people. So they need some sort of major press event to push these agendas, right?
Well, that's right. And, Andrew Gillum, who ran for governor here, mayor of Tallahassee at the time, who since paid a price for getting into ethics problems with regard to conflicts of interest and FBI agents and everything else, he was pushing this narrative, this race-baiting narrative, and he may still be doing it for all I know. But people don't have the facts. Joel went on a radio show earlier today. I was listening, and the radio talk show host had no idea what the truth was, and he straightened him out. And this guy was an African American and was very, very reasonable. He said, Joel, that makes sense. Tell him about it, Joel.
Yeah, well, this was a show in Vegas, and the guy just pretty much repeated the media narrative that the Zimmerman family attorney, Benjamin Crump, put into the media, essentially that a small child was on a candy run, delivering candy to his brother when stalked, threatened, screamed for help, and was shot in cold blood. So he pretty much repeated that narrative. And what happens when you repeat a false narrative is that even fair-minded people, normal people, are so horrified, and that's the goal, is to break through normal logic and normal behavior that you'd be more skeptical. But then you put out a photo of a 10-year-old child, and I would say, oh my God, they better get this guy. I hope they get this guy, because you don't know better. And I'll tell you an interesting story that happened. I was in New York City, And it came out in the New York Post one day. This would have been 2007, I remember this, 2008. And the first report was that a white guy had murdered two black teenagers on a subway at midnight. And they were looking for this guy with a knife. He killed him with a knife. They were looking for this guy, and they put his picture out there. I said, oh, my God, this is a maniac. I hope they get him. And the next day, they got him. And everyone was like really happy that they got this guy. And the third day, they let him go because they got the real story. It wasn't from his two friends. There were four kids together. So these four kids, that were black, African-American, they had been robbing stores. And then they got on the subway and took over the subway car and attacked this guy, Hispanic kid, attacked him with a knife. And he happened to have a knife. So he fought back, and unfortunately, tragically, two of these kids were killed. Wow. And he was just trying to save his life. And by the third day it was over. We couldn't believe they let this guy go. But then when you read what happened, it was self-defense. No one ever heard about it again.
Well, in fact, here, as we all can remember, is that they weren't going to charge George Zimmerman at first. It was only when the race baiter, vigilante, con men, shakedown artists like Sharpton got involved, or Jesse Jackson got involved, where the president of the United States, Barack Obama, said, I could have had a kid that looked like Trayvon, creating this racial division. And then the prosecutors, headed for the hills. They figured they better go with the flow or they'll be called racist too. So he winds up getting ultimately criminally charged, and we get into this trial, and it becomes just an exercise in vigilante justice. And there, of course, you have, the master of con men and vigilante justice. You might remember the Tawana Brawley affair, where this character also committed fraud many, many years ago. And, he's now a major media figure on MSNBC. I mean,
let me point
unbelievable.
Out, not only at the time, he was Barack Obama's race advisor. He went to the White House 80 times, Al Sharpton. He was dispatched down there. And Benjamin Crump, it's in the movie. Benjamin Crump has Al Sharpton at a rally where they're demanding Zimmerman's arrest with no probable cause. And Crump yells out to the audience, he says, "We called up to New York City and got somebody with a track record." Well, Al Sharpton's track record was Race Hoax, 1989, Crown Heights riots, race baiting, 1991. I think it was 1995 was the Freddy's Fashion Mart massacre, 7 people murdered. This was his track record that they wanted him to come down to Sanford. And that's what he did. He came down and created this racial animus.
Well, not just that, Joel. Let me say there's video out there. I remember seeing it, on cable news. Maybe Hannity played it, others, is that where he is advocating killing white people. I may be wrong, but it's out there. I mean, he is just the flip side of Louis Farrakhan.
Right. Well, anyway, one of the major points of my film and book is that the media and politicians used a tragic killing of Trayvon Martin, which was a terrible tragedy. I know even George mentioned in the film that it took him a long time to get over even taking a life. That Trayvon was the same age as some black kids that he was mentoring, whose parents were in prison. So this was used by politicians. I think George even wrote an article the other day. I read it, where he said that he and Trayvon Martin ended up having a lot in common, that they were both used by the media and by politicians for their political agendas. And it was an evil agenda. They used the tragic death of a very troubled black teen to try to put a Hispanic man in prison so they could control the black voting bloc, which was not in the tank for Obama in 2012. There was 70-80% unemployment in urban communities. Illegals were coming in, taking jobs. Businesses were closing. They were not getting anything done for black Americans. Obama didn't do anything. So this was used to polarize, I think, to help get Obama elected. And mind you, again, the DOJ was organizing protests. At the same time, the backdrop, Obama was using the IRS at the same time to break up the opposition, the Tea Party movement. So he was using the tools of state to keep a hold on power because his socialist policies always fail. That gives you a little backdrop to what happened in 2016. We're going to see this IG report next week, but pretty much people understand the FBI, DOJ, CIA was used to try to keep a hold on power. And that's the tyranny of liberal fascism.
By the way, let me divert a little bit now that Joel made the transition, because I was going to talk about this at the end, but I want to spend most of the time on on Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman and the lawsuit. But this is what I've been saying, Joel. Hate to say I've been right. Excuse me, Jason. Jason, yeah. Joel. All my friends begin with the letter J. Okay. But the recent leaks, and they're probably accurate, that Michael Horowitz is the Inspector General's report on Fusion GPS, on the Steele dossier, and all the criminality of the Clintons and everything else, Peter Strzok and Page and Rosenstein, Comey, the whole lot of them, is not going to hold any higher up accountable.
Right.
Is exactly what I've been saying. And then it was leaked just yesterday that John Durham, the guy up there in Connecticut, this U.S. attorney, that he's not going to make any finding like that either. So, and then the Department of Justice leaks that the Attorney General, our so-called legal messiah, Bill Barr, is in fact contesting those findings. You know, he's not contesting those findings. They've got more dirt on Barr because they've got dirt on everybody rather. He's just covering their bases. And then to make matters worse, Greg Jarrett, comes on and says, oh, this is on Hannity. Well, you can't really believe what's being said. There's going to be justice. And then you have Hannity saying the same thing. Right. You see, and this is why this media narrative on both sides is so dishonest. They don't tell the truth to the American people. In the case of Fox and Hannity and Jarrett and others, they want to boost ratings. They want to maintain advertising dollars. Hannity's viewership went up to 4 million this week, over these matters. And that's why I don't watch Fox anymore. It's why I turn on the golf and tennis channel, because I get the news, and that's it. Over. I make my own decision. And I suggest other people should do the same thing, because on both sides of the political spectrum, or spectra, however you want to say it, these things are not serving the American people, and it's why you are with Crowdsource the Truth. It's why what Joel did, I'll call you both Jay, okay, Dr. J, is you're the white version of Dr. J. Okay, yeah. You know how to slam dunk, both of you. Right. And this, I'm from Philadelphia. I used to play for the 76ers that I rooted for. Okay. So this is something that, it's why it's so valuable what Joel did and what you do, Jason. Is I've had very little sleep lately, by the way, so I don't even know my name.
Don't worry about it, Larry.
This is why we need to get the truth out, crowdsource the truth.
Yeah.
And now, Trayvon hoax.
Let me ask you guys a couple things, because this is huge, and the media is not just being irresponsible. I really believe they're proactive participants in everything that you're talking about. Look at this headline from the horrendous birdcage liner, The Washington Post. They're talking back in 2013 about how the media might have helped George Zimmerman go free. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely the opposite of what actually happened. And I haven't read the article, but it's sort of pointless reading anything in the Washington Post, because it literally is a public relations tool for the CIA and the deep state. It's a piece of trash. I'll tell you something. When I went to France my junior year in Aix-en-Provence to study, they put me with a woman, Madame Donier. Joel speaks French, by the way, as well. And, she was not very well off, and I had to go to the bathroom. I don't mean to be off color or anything, but rather than handing me toilet paper, she handed me newspaper. And I'll tell you something. I used it then. I had to, but I wouldn't even wipe. You know what? Yeah, well suited to that. Anything with a Washington Post. It's not even worth that.
Look, they come up with these changing narratives. Of course, it was the media that accepted Benjamin Crump's false narrative in the first place. Instead of simply telling Crump, well, you're full of it. The police already investigated. We're not buying this crap that you're selling, you and Sharpton. Instead, they just repeated word for word what he said. Just like they said, hands up, don't shoot. They repeated this Skittles and iced tea narrative. And they're the reason, pretty much, that Zimmerman was, had a special prosecutor appointed because they were under so much media pressure. And the media had a job to do. I mean, I got asked a question. This guy from NBC was asking me last night, the night before I did an interview for over an hour, of which 12 seconds made it on air. But he kept asking me, he said, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that in your investigation? And I said, well, he said, I was at the trial. I said, well, why didn't you just, after the trial, why didn't you go read the public documents? You had a job to do. Of course, that didn't make it on the air, but the media, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, the media had 6 years. Anyone could have just requested the public documents. It's an open record state. And you just start reading, and you can get to know Trayvon and understand kind of what he went through, what happened. And what happened to him is that his father divorced his stepmother, Alicia Stanley, who he calls Mama Alicia.
Yeah.
And that was November 2011, and he had to leave his mother of 12 years and go back and live with his biological mother, Sabrina Fulton, and he started acting out very badly. Alicia Stanley's in the film. She even kind of gives a hint to Anderson Cooper. She says he wanted to live with me and his father, meaning this was all acting out, throwing caution to the wind, fighting, heavy marijuana use, dealing guns. He lost his mother. His father wasn't home. So I say at the end of the film, I'll give away the end. One of the lessons is that the problem for young black men is not what the media wants you to think, that there are armed white men in the streets or black or white cops that want to shoot you because of your skin tone. The real problem is the lack of strong black men in the home to give guidance. And that's what helped lead to Trayvon to go down this terrible path that led to this confrontation. And then, of course, there are, it's a big country. We got 320 million people. There are tragedies and circumstances where police actually do shoot someone accidentally or get scared or there's some problem. But it's not because the country is racist. I grew up in Tennessee in the 80s. I never heard the N-word. So they want to convince us this is a racist country just to polarize and take advantage of the fears of African Americans about this.
Yeah, and I might use the refrain of Michael Jackson. I don't care whether you're black or white. Okay, it's not the issue. It's that whatever you are, you have to be held accountable for what you do. And you just can't hide behind your race or your religion or your creed or ethnicity. You have to be held accountable. And you've heard me be very, very critical, Jason, about the Jewish left, even though I'm Jewish and a Christian, a Jewish Christian Messianic, is that you have to hold your own people accountable. And here's the irony again, is that what I've seen is that African Americans are more appalled by this after they see Joel's movie and after they, read the lawsuit that I'd filed for George Zimmerman than the whites are, than the whites of Berkeley, California.
Yeah, all my email. Did I tell the story of the girl? Did I tell that yet? I'm getting confused. Did I tell you about the girl with the black son?
Yes, you did. You've both recounted how the response that you've gotten from black people is way more receptive to this information than that of white people, and I have had the same experience. In fact, I want to talk a bit more about this guy, Benjamin Crump, because I've recently begun a show with the Bishop Larry Gators, who is a black man and a friend of mine, and he has opened my eyes to a secret society called the Boule. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but this is essentially the equivalent of the Skull and Bones Society, which is at Yale. This is the equivalent in Black America. It is a society the bishop goes through in great detail. I think that you would both appreciate it, how this society was formed, who is in it, and to my great shock...
Jason, before we go further, let me just say something.
Yeah, it looks like you got 3 white guys in that group.
Before I say something, let me go further, is that I'm representing George Zimmerman. I don't want to discuss anything that deals with anything that might arguably not be accurate. Okay,
it's right here on Benjamin Crump's webpage. He says it. Okay. He's a member of the Boule.
That may be, but I'm gonna defer from that right now because I've got a very strong lawsuit against him for millions of dollars, and I'm going to let that evidence speak for itself.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that background on Crump. I mean, I'm focusing on what his role was back then during the film. You see him quite a bit in the movie. Of course, Black Lives Matter was formed because of this case, and he's somebody that's kind of taken up that mantra of becoming a self-styled civil rights lawyer. He pops up everywhere where anyone would like to allege any kind of racial animus or police misconduct. He'll pop up right there. He wants to be that new generation of Al Sharpton, it looks like. I actually called his office I was just trying to call down there to kind of see if I could reach him and if there was a way to reach him. And I got a voicemail, so I hung up. And I got a call back saying, you didn't leave a message, but we wondered if you had a case you'd like to, report. So he did open up a national law firm just for that purpose. And it's just so divisive and so offensive to people like me that grew up with multiracial society that never had any problem. We judge people by the strength of their character. So I think most people are just very uncomfortable with this type of race.
Yeah, let me say, Jason, that not, whatever the case may be, it wasn't in any way to put you off, but because I'm in litigation right now, I want to stick to what Trump did in terms of what's in the complaint. And you need to go no further than to look at the cover of his book, Genocide Against Colored People, Open Season, I'm paraphrasing, and that tells you everything about Benjamin Crump, for which we are seeking to hold him accountable for large damages. And I hope for his sake that he has insurance, because this is very serious. I certainly know that HarperCollins is going to be held accountable. If you look at the complaint, I sent him and HarperCollins a letter in advance of filing the case on behalf of George Zimmerman. It's attached to the complaint as an exhibit. Go to Klayman.com. And I said, this needs to be corrected. You need to retract this. You need to take this book off the market. It's threatening, frankly, it's continuing to create the potential for violence against George Zimmerman, who's already been shot at. They attempted to kill him. Some people attempted to kill him. I don't know who. But this is totally irresponsible. We got no response. None. And instead, what you get is what Joel talks about. He's been following it. Is that this is ridiculous, it's stupid, it's whatever is the case may be. And apparently, he's also claiming we sued the Martin family for defamation. We didn't. And maybe we would have. The statute of limitations run on what they said, and I hope they don't say anything currently that causes us to have to bring a defamation suit. And last but not least, and let me send this message out to the world right now, is that ABC is going to be sued, what they have done. They said that I specialize in suing black politicians. You know what? The only black politician I've sued in 42 years that I can recall is Barack Obama, and he's not even black. Okay? So this is what you're up against. They're trying to whip up, violence and hatred against me as if I only sue black people. I've sued Bush, George W. Bush. I've sued Cheney. I've sued Newt Gingrich. I've sued Tom DeLay. 99.9% of the people I've sued in my public interest and other capacities have been white.
Well, Obama's biracial, so you'd consider him black, I guess. That's the term today.
I've always found that unfair. He's half of each. So you guys have both spoken about the polarizing aspects of this case, and I can't help but be reminded that Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals instruct his readers who are trying to foment chaos and be radical, that they need to personalize and polarize. So it seems that this Trayvon hoax was an absolute Alinsky Marxist type of, mind control effort to fool people.
Well, make no mistake about it, Barack Obama is the one that ignited the race war, and everybody followed suit. When the president goes in that direction, and again, like Joel said, we were proud to have a black president, even if I don't agree with him politically or otherwise. That's the reality. But in the remaining time that we have, let Joel tell you what happened to a press conference and screening in Coral Gables this week, because it tells you something about the media and people and the way they act these days under this deep state mentality that we live in.
Yeah, I did schedule a film screening, and they were going to have a press conference just before for the Coral Gables Art Cinema in Coral Gables, Florida. And I scheduled it from California a few weeks ago. I got a contract. I paid in advance. Nothing different than any other film screening I've done over the years. I've done 100. National Press Club in Washington, D.C. hosted the film. September 16, had a great crowd. I had a lot of kids from Howard University in D.C., Black College. They came out. They loved the film. My two biggest fans there were actually the two security guards. These big, tough black guys were our security guards. They came and shook my hand and had me sign a DVD. They loved it so much. So it was a great start, and that was just a typical film screening. So here I come from California. We've invited the media. Thousands of emails go out, invitations. I've accepted invitations from Fox News, CNN, everybody. They're all coming. It's going to be a wonderful event. A lot of time and effort went into it. And they had said in advance, bring your Blu-ray disc just to test it on the system. Very normal thing to do the day before. And there I am in Coral Gables, and I get a call from Brenda Moe, the manager. She said, we're going to have to cancel your event. I've got the mayor, the city council, and the city attorney is here, and they've got a lot of problems with this, and I have to cancel. I said, you can't do that. We have a contract. It's signed. I've already made this effort. Let me talk to them. She said, no, I'm going to talk to them and call you back. She calls me back. She won't. She says, we're canceling it.
Wow.
Let me talk to the lawyer. No, you can't. Can't talk to him anymore. And they just canceled it. I had all this media still today. They're sending me emails. Did you reschedule? Did you reschedule? It's almost impossible to find a venue for a theater on a one-day notice because it's booked up.
Well, this is the tragedy here is that we weren't talking about the Three Stooges, Moe, Larry, and Curly. Okay, we were talking about the mayor of Coral Gables, and we're talking about the city council, and we're talking about breaking a private contract. This is Joel's contract, okay? Yeah. And I had Joel sign a waiver along with George Zimmerman because I represent George Zimmerman, but we're going to be bringing a lawsuit here because this is an abridgment of First Amendment rights. He deserves to be able to show his film. I deserve to be able to get up there and talk about the lawsuit. It wasn't for publicity. It's because we want to educate the American people on right and wrong and arrest this race war. We want to stop it for everybody. Well, this is despicable what happened. Yeah. And people have to be held accountable for it.
Yeah, I asked her, I said, what if it was a Michael Moore movie and somebody had a problem with that? Would you also cancel it? They won't answer. So the stories keep changing. I think she told CBS 4, I did an interview with them for this story, and they said that the lady said that I didn't have a contract. And of course I had one and sent it to CBS 4. So we got these crazy stories. It's just pure censorship and shouldn't have happened. So I'm hoping to come back to South Florida in a month or two when we can reschedule and have the media come again. And it was a private event, actually. It was a tremendous amount of media were invited. And the overlying message is not only the investigation of this legal case, of course, but I am emphasizing how this can bring the country back together, that America was played. We got played by an epic race hoax that divided us for no reason. Politicians and the media just wanted to pull us apart when always America's aspirations have always been to come together.
Well, that's right. And, you can't allow this thing to keep happening. You have to put your foot down and try to nip it in the bud. And that's, in fact, what George Zimmerman's trying to do, because as the article that he wrote, and get my WorldNet Daily column for tonight, and you can find it at freedomwatchusa.org and also larryklayman.com and elsewhere. We are all George Zimmerman in many ways. We are all Trayvon Martin. We all are the same people. We have to learn to live together and not to destroy each other.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up Saul Alinsky is that, when Barack Obama was running for president, he was really maligned by his detractors as having his only experience be that of a community organizer. And I think for people who are unfamiliar with that term, you hear community organizer, at least for me, my thoughts immediately went to, oh, well, this guy's like some kind of local politician putting together picnics and block parties and whatever. But community organizer is absolutely a Saul Alinsky term. And in that image I was showing of him earlier, he says, I could organize hell. So Obama was signaling to the Marxist Alinskyites that he's one of them, and that this type of Trayvon hoax where they personalize, they polarize, they pit blacks against whites, Jews against Gentiles, this is what they love to do, to foment chaos and hatred.
Well, let me comment of course, I made a pretty well known for my film about Obama's background as kind of an alternate history of Obama's personal life and politics called Dreams from My Real Father. And I do talk about his days as a community organizer, and I explained that the term organizer is really a cover, that the real job is community agitator.
Right.
And they're actually trained at the Midwest Academy. I covered that in the film, is where Obama both learned and then taught for 10 years. And what they teach is, and I'm quoting, they teach them to rub salt in the wounds of minorities. And the idea is to get them to be activated for this socialist agenda, which doesn't serve their interests. That's why during Obama's 8 years everything got worse for Black America. I did a film called There's No Place Like Utopia, and I actually talked to African Americans in inner city Chicago, all over the country. And they're the biggest conservatives I ever spoke to. They say, we don't want illegals coming in taking our jobs. We don't want legalization of drugs. We want more police. They're conservatives. But then I said, well, why'd you vote for Obama? Well, because they're identifying with his ethnicity, based on his race. And I say, but everything got worse. And they started saying, you got a point there. So, but these people, these people are pretty smart. They're not in the tank, but they're the politicians and the media know that they want to remind black people of racism and fear to try to shape the narrative.
That's right. African Americans generally live in the real world, the rough and tumble real world. They understand cons and frauds, whereas the elite of Berkeley, California, in their ivory tower, don't understand what's going on. And that's why I've often said, with regard to the Jewish left, who basically hates Israel and, wants to see the Palestinians take the whole place over, they should go live on the West Bank or in Gaza or in the Golan Heights and understand what it's all about. I think they changed their mind.
The African Americans I spoke to, which were very many, they knew that open borders, legalized drugs, and no police and no prison, they didn't want that. They wanted the opposite. They were just good, hardworking Americans that wanted the normal things that we have in a free market society where they can order a living and improve themselves. And Obama was, at the forefront to be able to capture that voting bloc because they were constantly reminded, especially in 2012, of racial issues. And I think this film is having a part in educating people that this modern era of racial division, fake news, now we know race hoaxes, it really started here and it never had to happen.
Well, and Joel's doing that, and what I'm doing as a lawyer on behalf of George Zimmerman is to say this kind of conduct has consequences, and there needs to be consequences. And that's something, legal consequences. That's something that our government's unwilling to do. They run away from this. And even most of the conservative media, exception of you and a few others, runs away from this. And it was not until this lawsuit was brought that anybody even looked at Joel's book to speak of. And we didn't bring it for that purpose. Joel, he brought it, Zimmerman, because to get about justice for himself and other people.
Yeah, I got to tell you media stories. The Miami Herald actually did a decent, fair job covering the Zimmerman trial back in 2013. Many reporters, multiple, covered it. I contacted all the reporters there, including the editor, Rick Hirsch, sent him the email, all the explanation. All of these people are from Miami. Sabrina Fulton is running for Miami-Dade commissioner. She knew about this witness fraud. It harmed America. Will you take a look at this film? In 12 minutes, I got an email back from the editor of the Miami Herald, will pass. They want to take a look at it. Now, after this event with the Coral Gables cancellation and putting out our press release, and when Larry's lawsuit hit, all of a sudden I got like 6 Miami Herald reporters emailing me as if they just found out about this today. So that's just how fickle.
Well, and that's because they had egg on their face. We did not bring the lawsuit for publicity purposes or to promote Joel's movie or book. But that's the logical consequence. Unless you hold people accountable, they don't pay attention. But when there's a risk involved and when you will be held accountable, then, of course, they have to pay attention.
Yeah, they all wanted to come to the press conference. I've got emails from 4 or 5 guys at the Miami Herald. I want to come. I want to come. And they're like my new best friends. But 6 weeks ago, they wouldn't give me the time of day.
They're his new best friends today, but don't turn your back, okay?
Yeah. Right. All right. Hopefully you can reschedule that press conference.
It won't last.
Gentlemen, we're just about out of time. I want to just ask Joel one more quick question, because this is an image that's come up many times. Have you seen this image of Barack Obama before, Joel? Do you know what this is about?
Sure, that's in my movie. That's him at the Midwest Academy in Chicago, where he was a trainer for socialist activism. And that's, he was a trainer for Acorn as well. And this is just the radical training that Obama had. So he was trained so well, he was a teacher of this Marxist organizational concept. And he was at the forefront of trying to recruit minorities. That was his job. He was hired out of New York, out of Columbia University, to work for the Developing Communities Project in Chicago, which was a leftist organization meant to bring the black community onto the socialist causes. The socialists always failed to recruit black people because they were religious, and Marxism was atheist. They wanted to do with it. They failed to recruit them because black people were also religious. It's love thy neighbor. And Marxism preached war between the classes, fight your neighbors, different classes. So they were desperate to get black people onto their movement because they were so well organized with their churches. And Obama was instrumental, because he was biracial, trying to bring him in to teach this radicalism to African Americans that does nothing for them. It just makes things worse. And that's why when he was president, things only got worse.
It's a good explanation of an image that's shown up many times that I did not know what it was all about. He's got corporations, banks, utilities, and then something that says DE, looks like GOP. Is he talking about a uniparty, making a unified political party?
Not sure if that says, I'm not sure what that says, but he was a teacher at the Midwest Academy. I've got all the history. If you go back to Dreams from My Real Father, you'll get all the background on that. Stanley Kurtz wrote a book called The Radical in Chief. He also goes into a lot of detail on what was behind that photo.
Wow, I'll have to take a look at that. So Dreams from My Real Father is a great book that people can get, learn more about Barack Obama.
It's a movie.
It's a DVD, right. Not a book.
Correct.
It's a great movie for people to watch. He certainly looks a whole lot more like Frank Marshall Davis than Barack Obama Sr. But the really movie people need to see if they haven't is the Trayvon hoax. You can go to the TrayvonHoax.com and stream it from there, right? There's a link right here.
Yeah, if you go to on the buy page, on the buy page you can stream it right there. You can buy the DVD, the ebook, or the book version. That'll click you over to Amazon.
Great. So people can watch that. And if you haven't seen it, it's very important. People can also go to LarryKlayman.com and learn more about the lawsuit that's been filed against members of Trayvon Martin's family, his attorney, Benjamin Crump, and the publishing house that has put out this incredibly inflammatory book that Mr. Crump has written. And people should go to LarryKlayman.com. Don't forget to visit freedomwatchusa.org and support Larry's team over there at Freedom Watch. Gentlemen, anything else you wanted to bring up before we close out the show for today?
Happy holidays.
Absolutely.
We hope to make it a lot happier with bringing about justice.
Get a DVD and a book of the Trayvon hoax in every Christmas stocking.
That's a very good idea.
Thank you, Jason. What you do is extremely valuable.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate you joining me today. I'm going to be back in just an hour with John Cullen's Las Vegas investigation. John Cullen is conducting his own impeachment inquiry, and I guarantee it's not what you think. Tune in 1 hour to see that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.